here's a special interaction that I had with CII President Rajiv Memani about the impact of India's Union Budget 2026, the announcements and the impact that these announcements will have on India's economy, the key sectors, and of course markets. Here's a quick look at the full discussion that I had with him earlier in the day, just right after these budget announcements were made. You take a look at this. Meanwhile, from me and Shabani, goodbye, and thank you very much for tuning in to ET Now for seeing our continuous coverage as far as Union Budget 2026 is concerned. It's been an absolute honor to bring you detailed programming on the Union Budget and its various implications. Good night. Thanks very much, Mr. Memani, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. First things first, while we do understand that you will still go through the fine print of the budget, but overall, from what's been presented today and from the finance minister's speech, what do you make of the direction in which India is headed? And what is the messaging that the government is giving so far as the budget presentation is concerned in terms of what the priorities of the government are?
I think I would say I must compliment the Honorable Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. I think they've presented this, they've laid down a very strong and credible roadmap to see how India becomes more competitive as a country. And whether it's through structural reforms, whether it's through macroeconomic discipline, whether it's to providing nudges to some sectors which make India more competitive and which are long-term investment guzzlers, I think they've done a very credible job in putting that whole thing together.
So you've spoken about the hits, you've spoken about the key takeaways. Tell us the misses.
Well, I haven't talked about
something that you were anticipating and expecting.
No, it's too early to say. I would say what I really liked about the budget was the emphasis on manufacturing, the emphasis that they have put on infrastructure. The allocation that they have made towards infrastructure, not only the overall capital allocation, but also the amount that they have spent on the transfers to the states, the focus that they have on MSMEs. I think that's also very good. What has been laid out for growth capital, for debt, I think that's very positive. So the emphasis on service sectors. And for me, the most interesting part is without spending too much of money in the next year's budget, the nudges that they've provided for data centers, for semiconductors, for MROs, for nuclear, for rare earth, for GCCs. So I would say those nudges are very, very important, and they have not spent too much of money. And why I'm saying that's important, and I'll come to the misses also. Why I'm saying that's important is because we are in an era where last year our tax revenues fell short by 1,50,000 crores. So they had to curtail a lot of expenditure. So there is not a lot of fiscal space that is available to splurge and spend. So they have to tighten the spending. So in spite of they have spent. One area where I would have thought, and we'll have to see the fine print whether it's there or not, there's been a lot of ask for strengthening of the dispute resolutions. They have done some of it in the budget, in terms of, at the CIT appeal level, the amount that instead of 20% will deposit 10%. But that is one area why we would have had to, that's one area where I think I would think there could have been greater emphasis.
Right, but what about jobs, given the fact that, while we are seeing global geopolitical disruptions, but there are also tech-related disruptions also happening, sir. And when you have, technologies like deep tech or AI sort of disrupt the workforce, it's important for the government to sort of prioritize job creation. So has that been prioritized?
Yeah, I think job creation comes through greater economic activity. We are generally seeing very high levels of, once you have high levels of economic activity, job creation will happen. And if you look at the data of EPFOs, of ESI data, I think the formal job creation is growing up. The labor laws, what they did before, that will also lead to greater formalization. But if you have more economic activity, just if you look at electronics manufacturing, the more emphasis on electronics manufacturing and the jobs that will create, if you look at textiles, you look at leather, those labor-intensive manufacturing areas where they're emphasizing on, I think that will definitely lead to greater job creation.
Right. So when you mention manufacturing, Mr. Memani, I have to ask you this. While the government has earmarked 5 to 6 sectors so far as manufacturing push is concerned, and we've seen PLI schemes being rolled out in the past, while some of those schemes have been successful, the others have not so much. So, of course, there's been an ask from the industry in terms of strengthening our domestic value chains, of strengthening our domestic value domestic ecosystems. Has that thrust really been given by the government on boosting local value addition, that we reduce imports.
Yeah, I think that came through the economic survey, and I think if you look at the allocation in electronics manufacturing, if you look at the creation of the 3 chemical parks that they talked about, if you look at the support that you provide to us, see, the only way you can create greater value creation is by making the industry more competitive, supporting them where the support is required, and also creating better frameworks for ease of doing business. So if you actually look at that, once that is there, then so if you're getting nuclear power, if you're reducing the cost of that, that's great. Data centers will help you in your technology journey. If you make it easier for GCCs, more and more GCCs will come in. So all that will lead to greater job creation. If there is economic growth, that will, and if you can create greater thrust on labor-intensive sectors, automatically job creation will happen. And again, I would say what is different this time is that if you look at all the schemes, there is a lot of focus on skilling, there is a lot of focus on education, there is a lot of focus on creating ecosystems. All that in the medium term to long term will help in creating more jobs. And tourism also, if you look at the amount of emphasis on tourism, that has the biggest force multiplier on jobs.
That's right. But what about exports, given the fact that, CII had presented that while these FTAs are going to take some time to sort of get into effect and get implemented, the EU FTA in itself is going to get implemented in 2027. There is a need for more resilient exports ecosystem so that exports can be boosted. Now, we do understand that the government did announce an EP export promotion mission last year. But exporters were essentially asking for more. Do you think that has been addressed in this budget?
I would say that, obviously government didn't have more tax to, they've already focused on, they prioritize much more on consumption from a tax standpoint. From an export standpoint, if you do custom duty rationalization, if you make the customs regime much more efficient, if you ensure that there is there is faster ways incentivizing some sectors, and I'm coming back to electronics because that's been a big growth engine, electronics, GCCs and others, that is definitely there. If exporters were looking at explicit subsidies because of the setback that they have had, I think that was not there. But if you look at the impacted sectors like textiles, leather, I think they have found space in the budget in the way the government is allocating more money and also bringing in newer policies there.
Right. So clearly the focus has been given on to global geopolitical disruptions and how those can be addressed via domestic reforms and domestic policy push that the government can bring about. So let me also ask you about the IT sector. IT stocks have sort of been active on the back of the announcement that came on GCCs and data centers, on AI as well. Do you think in terms of the disruption that we've seen globally, particularly from the United States for the IT sector, that will be able to, the budget announcements will be able to cushion?
I think that budget is not by itself, can't solve all problems. I would say as long as we can do more skilling, I think there's some benefit that's gone because of the rupee, the way rupee dollar or rupee euro and other currencies have behaved. I think those, and if you can provide more tax certainty to them in India, those are the things through which at least the technology sector becomes much more competitive. I think, as I said, technology sector has by and large stayed away from the budget. I think they've worked much more on market forces. And India has a very, very competitive story there. So as long as we can continue to be skilling more rapidly, I think that's what we need to do.
Absolutely. So just one final question. If you had to describe the budget in 3 words or 2 words, how would you describe that? You had.
No,
is it more cautionary? Is it reform-oriented? How would you...
I would say it is helping India becoming, it reinforces India's journey of competitiveness. I think that's what I would say. And through a policy of continuity and macroeconomic discipline.
All right, sir. On that note, thank you very much for taking the time out and speaking to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.